In the year 508, Paris is not yet the city of boulevards, museums, cafés, revolutions, and glowing monuments. It is a smaller, colder, rougher place, a settlement gathered around the Ile de la Cité, surrounded by the slow grey water of the Seine. The Roman world has cracked. The old name Lutetia is fading into memory. And into this uncertain landscape comes Clovis, king of the Franks, a warrior who understands something powerful. Whoever controls Paris controls more than a city. He
From
controls a
this day
symbol.
forward, this city is
Clovis
the
makes
seat of my
Paris one of the
power.
centres of his
Let all
kingdom.
Franks look to
It
Paris
is
as
not
the
yet the
centre of
capital
our
of
kingdom.
France as we imagine it today. France itself is still becoming France, but the seed is planted. Around wooden houses, churches, muddy streets, and defensive walls, a new identity begins to form. Paris becomes not only a place where people live, trade, pray,
Three coins
and
for
fear
that. I
invasion,
can get it cheaper
it becomes a
elsewhere.
place where
Look to the
power
wall, master.
wants to be seen. In the centuries after Clovis, Paris grows under the shadow of Christianity and monarchy. Churches rise where Roman buildings once stood. Monasteries become centres of learning, land, and influence. The dead kings of France will later rest at Saint-Denis, north of the city, turning the area into a sacred landscape of royal
Push
memory.
forward. To the
But
walls.
Paris is not always safe.
Hold the line.
Vikings sail
Brace
up the
your
Seine in the
spears.
9th century, and the city
To the
faces
river.
raids,
Protect the
fire,
children.
and
Hold
siege.
the line. They must not pass
Imagine
the
the
gate.
people standing near the river, hearing the approach of ships, knowing that the water which feeds trade can also bring destruction. Paris survives not because it is peaceful, but because it learns to endure. By 987, with the rise of Hugh Capet, Paris begins to matter even more. The Capetian dynasty slowly strengthens royal power, and the city becomes tied to the idea of a French kingdom. Around the palace, on the Ile de la Cité, around markets and churches, the medieval city tightens its grip on history. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Paris is becoming one of the greatest cities in Europe. Its streets are narrow, loud, and alive. Merchants shout beside the river. Butchers, bakers, scribes, students, priests, beggars, and nobles all move through the same dense maze of stone and mud. In 1163, construction begins on Notre-Dame Cathedral. For generations, workers carve stone, lift beams, shape glass, and build upward as if the city itself is trying to reach heaven. Most of them will never see the cathedral finished. Their names vanish, but their hands remain in the walls. At the same time, the University of Paris rises on the left bank. Students arrive from across Europe to study theology, philosophy, law, and medicine. Latin fills the air in lecture halls and taverns. Paris becomes a battlefield of ideas as much as a city of kings. Knowledge, faith, and authority collide here. But medieval Paris is also fragile. The Black Death strikes in the 14th century. The 100 Years' War brings fear, occupation, and hunger. The city knows glory, but it also knows bodies in the streets, empty houses, and bells ringing for the dead. By the 1500s, Paris enters the Renaissance. The city becomes richer, more elegant, and more dangerous. Printing presses multiply. Books move faster than armies. Ideas spread through workshops, universities, and royal courts. Kings begin reshaping Paris into a city worthy of monarchy. Francis I turns the Louvre from a medieval fortress into a royal residence. What was once built for defense begins to transform into a palace of art and power. The message is clear. Paris is no longer only protected by walls, it is protected by prestige, but this is also an age of religious violence. Catholics and Protestants clash across France, and Paris becomes a stage for one of the darkest episodes in its history. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. The streets that carried merchants and students now carry fear. History in Paris is never clean. Beauty and brutality often stand beside each other. In the 17th century, Paris continues to expand. Bridges, squares, churches, mansions, and institutions give the city a more monumental shape. Yet under Louis XIV, royal attention shifts toward Versailles. The king leaves Paris politically, but not symbolically. Paris remains the intellectual, commercial, and restless heart of France. This distance matters. While Versailles shines with mirrors and ceremony, Paris fills with printers, lawyers, workers, philosophers, and critics. The city becomes the place where authority is questioned. In cafés and salons, ideas sharpen. The Enlightenment does not arrive like thunder. It spreads like candlelight from table to table, book to book, conversation to conversation. In 1789, Paris explodes into world history. Bread is expensive. Inequality is unbearable. Anger moves through the streets like a current. On July 14th, the people storm the Bastille, not just as a prison, but as a symbol of royal power. The stones of the fortress fall, and with them falls the illusion that monarchy is untouchable. Paris becomes the engine of the French Revolution. Crowds march, clubs debate, newspapers attack. The king is brought back from Versailles. The guillotine stands in public squares. Hope and terror walk together. For ordinary Parisians, revolution is not an abstract idea. It is hunger, suspicion, flags, songs, executions, and the terrifying belief that a new world can be born only by destroying the old one. After the revolution comes Napoleon Bonaparte. Paris becomes the capital of empire. Monuments rise to celebrate victory. Arches, columns, military symbols, imperial roads. The city is dressed in glory, even as France bleeds across Europe. When Napoleon falls, foreign armies enter Paris. The city that had sent power outward now feels power return against it. Yet Paris absorbs defeat, as it always does. It keeps its monuments, its ambitions, and its appetite for reinvention. In the 19th century, Napoleon III and Baron Haussmann transformed Paris more radically than almost anyone before them. Medieval neighborhoods are cut open, narrow streets disappear, wide boulevards, parks, sewers, railway stations, and elegant apartment blocks reshape the city. This is the Paris the world recognizes. Grand avenues, stone facades, balconies, cafes on corners, long views toward monuments. But it comes at a price. Thousands are displaced. Working class communities are pushed outward. The city becomes more beautiful, more modern, and also more controlled. Haussmann's Paris is not only architecture, it is power drawn with a ruler. In 1870 to 1871, Paris suffers siege during the Franco-Prussian War. Hunger returns. Then comes the Paris Commune, when workers, radicals, and citizens briefly take control of the city. For a few weeks, Paris becomes a revolutionary republic inside France. Then it is crushed in blood during the Bloody Week. The scars remain. Paris enters the modern age, carrying both elegance and rebellion. By the late 19th century, the city becomes a capital of art, science, and spectacle. The Eiffel Tower, built for the 1889 World's Fair, rises as a temporary structure, hated by many at first, and then becomes the most recognizable symbol of Paris. Painters, writers, musicians, dancers, and dreamers gather in Montmartre and Montparnasse. Paris becomes not only a city, but an atmosphere. In 1940, Nazi Germany occupies Paris. The city falls silent under flags it did not choose. Cafes remain open, trains run, people survive, but fear lives everywhere. Resistance networks pass messages. Jewish families are
Vive la
arrested.
France!
Collaboration
Vive
and
la
courage
liberté!
exist side by
Merci
side.
beaucoup!
In 1944, Paris is liberated. Crowds fill the streets again. The city breathes. After the war, Paris changes with immigration,
Sous les
reconstruction,
pavés,
new
la page.
suburbs,
Sous les
student
pavés,
movements,
la
and
page.
political
Allez,
unrest. In May 1968, students and
Il faut
workers
bloquer la
challenge
Sorbonne.
authority
Non, c'est trop
with
risqué.
protests
Regardez
that
les
shake
CRS.
France. Once again, Paris becomes a place where the
If you
future
look
is
just here,
argued
you'll
in the
notice the
streets.
distinct layering.
By
These are authentic
2026,
Roman traces,
Paris is
centuries
ancient
older
and
than the
modern at
medieval
once.
structure above them.
The city carries Roman traces, medieval stone, royal palaces, revolutionary squares, imperial monuments, Haussmann boulevards, metro tunnels, immigrant neighborhoods, fashion houses, museums, and Olympic memories. After the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games, Paris continues to live with questions about legacy, accessibility, transport, public space, and who the city is really for. The Seine, once the artery of medieval trade and royal power, is again central to the image of Paris. The same river that carried Roman boats, Viking raiders, merchants, revolutionaries, and tourists still cuts through the city like a line of memory. Paris in 2026 is not frozen in romance. It struggles with housing, climate, tourism, inequality, security, and identity. But that is exactly what makes it real. Paris has never been only a
Look at this
postcard.
one. My
It has
grandfather
always
took it
been
in
a
44.
battlefield
The
between
cafe
beauty
looks
and
almost the
pressure,
same, doesn't it? A
power
testament
and
to
people,
survival.
memory and change. And perhaps that is why Paris survives in the imagination of the world. Not because it remained the same, but because it never did. From Clovis in 508 to the crowded streets of 2026, Paris has been burned, rebuilt, occupied, celebrated, redesigned, wounded, and loved. Every stone seems to say the same thing. History did not pass through Paris. History stayed